So, you thought Marvel Phase 4 was going to be different. Hey, I did too. And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the season finale of WandaVision. It's so popular, Kevin Feige's already saying he might make a season 2. And you know what? I would watch it. But I think, it's interesting. I'm seeing a fight brewing already on the level of Wanda versus Agatha between Wanda stans who got everything they wanted and MCU stans who did not. And Wanda stans are very defensive. You guys are like, hey, it was fabulous. It's your fault for coming up with all those crazy theories, MCU stans. But you know what? Everyone's at fault. It's everybody's fault. Yes, we went wild with theories. We're not used to the weekly release format. We're used to getting our Marvel content a full serving at a time. But also, Marvel hardcore trolled us. I don't think it's fair not to point out that Marvel is also culpable in how off the rails we went a little bit watching this show. I mean, we know the multiverse is coming, thanks to Spider-Man 3's confirmed casting, Kevin Feige confirming at Disney Investor Day that WandaVision, Spider-Man 3, and Doctor Strange 2 are all part of the same story, and this did kick things off, but with a slower, softer start than we expected. I mean, we were so busy looking at her fashion, the vision of her and her clothes in the Darkhold. It wasn't until I watched the episode again that I saw the clear multiverse reference on the other page. So it's coming. Boy, that's a subtle reference. Really subtle. But also there were lines and things in the show itself that were clear, intentional misdirects. Like a lot of them. Monica's contact, Dottie not being on the board. The actress, by the way, who played Dottie going around saying, my role is very important. And I'm like, it wasn't. Calling the twins demon spawn, although that's still an open book, as we saw in the final end credit sequence. We're going to go through all of it, and I'm going to make separate videos now that WandaVision is done talking about what's going to happen coming up next. And then also all the Mephisto references, there were a lot. And really, a waste of White Vision, although that was really just setting up what might happen going forward. White Vision is literally a lifeline for Vision into going into the MCU going forward. And then the actors trolled us hardcore in interviews, promising a cameo, their words, not ours, on par with Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian Season 2 finale. They didn't have one. I don't know why they said that they did. I guess they were like, haha, we just talked about the fact that Paul Bettany was acting with himself, but, as Vision himself said, we are not amused. But the worst thing of all that will haunt this show, it's not going to pull the show down. Don't worry, Wanda stans, but it'll be a shadow that is always cast over it. And that's what they did with Evan Peters. Why cast the actor who played Fox's Quicksilver as your Quicksilver? I've seen some Wanda stans go like, hey, Evan Peters deserves to keep getting work. He does. But playing the same character? That's odd. And then to make him just a random actor with a joke name of Ralph Bohner? I mean, he's not Multiverse Quicksilver, even though, again, we know that we're doing the multiverse. They are bringing over actors from other Marvel franchises into the MCU, so it makes sense that they would do the same here. The subtitles in some countries, as many people pointed out, said he was Fox's Quicksilver. Why have that reference in the subtitles if that's not what's going on? He has powers, although obviously Agatha gave him those, but that's a bit of a leap. And then he's not even Nightmare. He's not Mephisto. I thought if he was going to be an actor, he'd at least be Simon Williams, who is an actor and superhero in the Marvel comics with a very strong tie to Wanda and Vision, who was even teased in the background of a featurette. More trolling. I mean, instead of making Evan Peters a joke, they could have done that. Some are already saying this is as bad a fake out as the Mandarin in Iron Man 3, who also ended up being an actor, by the way. Maybe they can put a show on together. And I'm sorry to say that I agree. I think they maybe felt they were being clever and mischievous, but I think that it was a mistake. I think it was a rare mistake, like actual mistake from Kevin Feige. I'm sure some of you will defend it down below. The faithfulness to Marvel continues to impress me in a good way. I'm glad, and I'm glad that some people are so protective of the brand. But I think most of us feel that was really bad. But again, we got some wonderful things out of this show, all relating to Wanda. And it was supposed to be all about Wanda and Vision, to be fair. Although again, they kind of pushed us in the other direction. You got her romance with Vision. You got her twins, who are going to be very important going forward. The Young Avengers are coming. The whole family's clearly coming back. An amazing new costume for Wanda. Like, wow, it's so good. It's going to get its own video. That costume is so good. A wonderful new villain in Agatha Harkness. Really, two anti-heroes with Wanda and Agatha. I mean, I guess witches are sometimes bitches. A lot of witch jokes. I can't believe they put witches in the MCU. And because Agatha's clearly going to come back. I mean, I think they're going to need her help when Wanda goes full villain. Oops, I did it again, says Wanda. And the best character development the MCU has ever seen, thanks to the extended TV format. That's a really nice bonus. Making Wanda, aka the Scarlet Witch, it made her the Scarlet Witch, but it made her as a character the most powerful for sure now, and I'd say the most popular female character in the MCU. And it's what Wanda deserves. All right, let's go through this finale. All right, so we're not going to go through it in the same depth that we usually do because, this was a more surfacey episode. Although I do have the same amount of screen grabs that I usually do. Although I grabbed so many screen grabs of her new outfit for my other video. It's great. All right, so anyway, we start off, and I thought it was very funny. I love the way Agatha just totally rose up from being on the ground. It was good and witch-like. So they're... So, Wanda's like, go to your room, boys. This is this is a witch fight. And so Agatha, as we suspected, as it was set up in the previous episode, is trying to drain Wanda's powers. So she starts to do it, and she's, I guess because Wanda's so powerful, she only gets her hand. So she gets her hand looks awful. I mean, like, wow, she needs some skin cream stat. So, but Wanda, in a wonderful product placement for Buick paid for that. Wanda, who loves to throw cars, also remember in Civil War, hits Agatha with a Buick for a nice Wizard of Oz joke. Although I'm sure both of those witches are offended. They're like, oh, we're doing witch jokes now? Is that what's happening? But I mean, I appreciated it because I'm not a witch, so I thought it was funny. But she was like, oh my God, she's not in here. I clear knocked her boots off. That's how hard she hit Agatha. She knocked her right out of her boots. So then White Vision shows up, and I have to tell you, he sounds like a 1970s sex star or music star. But anyway, I have to say, speaking of that, I didn't notice it until I was taking screen grabs, but that costume, look at the crotch on that thing. I mean, he has like a literal crotch sling that's been built into that. I mean, I don't know why they would do that to poor Paul Bettany. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's kind of the underwear, but when he moves, it looks so uncomfortable. That's why he's in such a bad mood. I did love villainous Paul Bettany, though. He so rarely plays the villain, and he's damn good at it. In fact, in some of his close-ups, he looks a little Clint Eastwoody. In fact, if I was going to do another Dirty Harry, I would consider casting Paul Bettany, even though, for most part, his movies never do very well. So anyway, I love that he starts to try and squeeze Wanda's head. Just pop it like a grape. And she's really selling it, too, by the way. She does it. Elizabeth Olsen is a phenomenal actress. I mean, that is the most clear thing to come out of WandaVision. So anyway, I liked what he says to her, and he says, and I was told you were powerful. Oh, burn! I thought that was great. And the way he delivered it was so cruel. It was fantastic. Talk about bitches. And then this is the first of 2 superhero landings. I mean, I feel Deadpool should start popping up and pointing these out because it's just become so funny. So so she does the superhero landing when other Vision shows up. And I have to say, they really kind of like broke their VFX budget. Like they couldn't uphold the 2 Visions. It was too much for them because some of the VFX here were super wonky. Like, wow. But Vision's like, I know what you did, Wanda. And she's like, I can fix it, I swear. And he's like, I don't know. It's going to kill all of us. So anyway, we have our science villain and we have our magic villain, as I've been discussing for you for the past couple of breakdowns. And I love this shot of White Vision with the flames behind him. That's great. And, Agatha has her great quips, like, oh, your ex and your new boyfriend are both at the same party. Who are you going to choose? And I'm like, so great. And then Monica is watching from afar in the man cave of Pietro. And she's stuck in there, and he keeps her in there because he's using his powers. And even more, to add insult to injury, he uses his powers in a very similar way to Quicksilver in the Fox movies. But it's not him. But then we go back to our Vision on Vision action with some wonky VFX. Although I did like the way they used their two powers. They're both extremely powerful. And we get our second superhero landing. Hilarious. And then, boy, look at that. I mean, it's just clear VFX. And so they're being tracked by SOAR. I don't know. I guess Wanda really did create not only a Mind Stone, a chunk of the Mind Stone that she confirmed is the part that lives in her. She literally wears her Mind Stone on her heart and her sleeve. But she made vibranium because they're tracking 2 vibranium objects, and that's incredible. Wakanda's like, we have a new competitor. She's creating vibranium all on her own. So Jimmy Woo shows up and he gets, monologuing really took down both our villains this episode, Hayward and Agatha. They should, never monologue. So Jimmy Woo gets him talking, takes a phone. I don't know where he got a safety pin from, because I would have been more impressed if he found a safety pin. And he uses his amateur magic to break free. And he says, flourish, as he takes off the handcuffs. And I thought, it was a missed opportunity to contrast his amateur, trick magic with Wanda's very real and Agatha's very real magic. But, so that was funny. So he calls his FBI buddies and he's like, you got to get here. Come on. So we go back into town and Agatha reveals the Darkhold, which is from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And you guys were right. Hydra Soap also. Although it seems that they're taking stuff from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. without actually referencing Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or making it canon. We'll see what happens with some of the characters that were more popular there, like Mockingbird and, Quake. Coulson, will he ever return after being banished to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? But they've taken the Darkhold. So Agatha's like, let me tell you a story about a witch called the Scarlet Witch. And here I have illustrations. And there she is on the right. And then there's the multiverse you can see on the left. And she says, you are destined. You're more powerful than the Sorcerer Supreme, so at least Doctor Strange got a name check, and your destiny is to destroy the world, or it seems to rip it apart. So pretty cool. So that the Darkhold's very important. We see it later. But here's Dottie, who's just in town, and she just confirms that Wanda has been holding her captive. And she's like, I like that the script has some good lines. And I like that Dottie was like, my daughter is the same age as your boys around there. Maybe they could be friends if you like that storyline. But could you just let her out of her room? And you're like, damn, Wanda, you were evil. And so Agatha lets everyone go, and they start really converging on Wanda. I mean, they do say they'd rather be dead than do this, so they're just going to suicide charge her. But we go back to the man cave, and Monica starts looking around, and she sees that this is Ralph. She sees his electric bill. And then she sees his headshot, and she's like, Ralph Bohner, and he laughs at that, and none of us laugh. We're like, seriously? And then Monica easily takes him down. I don't know what happens to his speed powers at this moment, but then we start to see a little bit more interest on Monica, some more details on Monica's powers. Her eyes don't just glow blue, they glow to whatever color she's seeing on the energy wavelength spectrum. So she wasn't taken over by powers when she looked into Agatha's basement. She could see magic, which seems to me like it wouldn't be in her science-based powers, but I guess it does. So she can see science and magic wavelengths. So she sees purple to see that the beads around his necklace are how Agatha is controlling him. So she rips it off and she frees him, and he's like, please don't hurt me. And that's literally the end of Evan Peters in the MCU. I can't believe it either. So anyway, we go back to our vision on vision action. Blue versus yellow light. That's a pretty good shot. I like that one. They're tearing up the neighborhood. And then, wow, Wanda's hands look bad. But so she's so upset about being yelled at, she can't take it. And she lashes out and starts choking all the neighbors. And Agatha's like, are you a villain? Let him go. And so Wanda's like, okay, I'll let everybody go. And so a great shot. She starts to pull back the hex. And it's an amazing tracking shot. In fact, my favorite shot in the whole episode. Although I like all her fashion shots too, but this was a beauty. So you go down Main Street, you see everybody running. They're never going to make it to the edge of town in time, but they can try. Then you see Wanda, and then you go through that, and you see Agatha up on the building with the billboard changing behind her, and then the Visions fighting in the background. It was amazing. It was really good. So they're fighting, and they seem evenly matched until, because the hex is going away, I didn't notice this till the second time I watched it, you can see Vision start to fall apart. So he starts to lose his powers, he falters, and he gets taken out. So as he plummets to the earth, Hayward and his goons drive into the hex because there's an opening. Now, Wanda notices that as she gets rid of her spell, she's getting rid of her family. And Agatha points out that they can't exist without the spell, and her children too, which is interesting because that's a big deviation from the comics. Is it though? Because the end credit scene makes it seem like they do have a connection to hell and dark magic. So anyway, she's like, I can't do it. And she pulls the hex back in. And then in a very Incredibles moment, I agree with all of you, she protects her family from Agatha taking a shot at them. But Agatha uses that opportunity to start sucking up more of Wanda's magic. And she's really looking bad. Woo! She looks so wow. It's not going well for her. Then we get this great shot of them as a family. I do like that. I think that's great. And so then they have to go and fight, the children are left to take care of the sword soldiers, which is very insulting to them. And then mom and dad go off to fight their respective villains. Now, I took this shot of the two Visions because I liked that there was a different design in their heads. They're not exactly the same, which I think is pretty cool. I liked a little bit of an upgrade, although it does make him seem like more machine than man. So I love that they have a fight in a library. Isn't that great? It's so Vision. And I love this look. I mean, like Paul Bettany. Doesn't he look like Clint Eastwood? He's a great villain. This is something he should do more of. So we're cutting back and forth between scenes. And then Agatha's like, I like this line too, same story, different century, about they always have people coming with pitchforks for gals like us. So she tries to take out the sword people, but Wanda saves them. But then I like this. This is actually very cool. Not only was I impressed that Wanda could make herself disappear, she could now teleport, but it shows this, when you look back at it, this is a good thing of setting up that Wanda is a fast learner, because that's going to come into play when she actually goes full-on battle with Agatha. So Hayward, after the children, incapacitate the soldiers from sword, I thought this was very out of character. I don't care how evil he is. He's not going to shoot kids. And why would he think it would even work? Because he knows they're superpowered. But still, just to make sure you really hate him, he literally opens fire on two children. And Monica, I don't know how she felt this was going to help. And also, what was he aiming at? He was shooting in between them? So she stops and she uses her powers and turns into a being of light. I'm not quite sure how this works, but basically she creates like a photon force field. Her power, her code name most likely being her mother's photon, which slows the bullets down. But she misses one, and Billy takes care of that Wiccan with his magic powers, which are blue like the other witches, because he's not the Scarlet Witch, so he's got blue magic, and that's why that makes sense. I think so. That works for me. Hayward tries to escape, but Darcy, in a little bit of a waste of Darcy, shows up just to pin him in, and she says, enjoy prison. Then we go back to the two Visions, and they have a quandary about a ship, which I thought was a pretty good metaphor for the two of them. Is either the real ship, maybe both aren't, maybe the rot, the age was the memories, and I was like, oh, this is good. I mean, it took up a lot of time, to be honest with you. But anyway, Vision's like, here, let me literally jog your memory, right? So, and I like this. It's, very much like, the famous, painting from the Sistine Chapel of Touch of Life. So he gives it to Synthoid Vision, and I thought it was really cool the way they did this. And his eyes change. There's a little bit of Mind Stone, maybe, that goes into him and rewrites his programming. And his eyes change to look human. And, the idea is that, of course, eyes are the window to the soul, so it's almost like he gives Vision a soul. And then they're mirroring each other a little bit, and it's too much for White Vision to handle, so he flies off and into the MCU sometime in the future. So then I liked this callback that Wanda was super creepy like she was in Age of Ultron, just like she did to Tony Stark and others, giving Agatha a nightmare, right? So she uses that old trick, and she puts Agatha right back in Salem where she was, at that scene that we saw before. But things do not go the way Wanda expected, because they're calling her the Scarlet Witch. They're like, you are the Scarlet Witch. And Agatha's like, I told you. And they put her up on the on the pike, to be burned at the stake. And I love that Wanda's crown appears. I think that's so cool. I almost wish that always was how it appeared instead of being an actual crown. I like both. As I said, I'd love it if she uses her magic, it accents the crown that she otherwise has. She's not always wearing the crown though, which is interesting. But so Agatha's like, I'll make a deal with you. You give me your powers, I'll let you continue to live in this fantasy. But Wanda says, no deal. I know you're evil. So they have a cool fight in the sky. This one looks a little bit better. And, Wanda's really struggling. And she seems to occasionally miss Agatha. And Agatha's like, wow, you really missed. But she doesn't realize that she's casting runes, which we find out in a moment. So anyway, though, Wanda goes right up to the line. She really gets withered in some very cool shots. Agatha takes all of her power, it seems. And she thinks she's won, and Wanda's just kind of floating there, and I think a really cool, creepy way. But then, in the effort to deliver the death blow, Agatha discovers that she doesn't have any magic. What? And that's when and I like the shot of her black fingers and, Wanda just floating there. But, Wanda, we know any moment about to be like, sucker! So then Wanda explains and starts to look normal again. And she says, hey, thanks for the quick lesson. I learned that if I cast these runes, you can't use your magic. So I guess it just took a moment for them to kick in. And that was great. That was a very good callback. Although, as I said, don't monologue. You only help your opponent. So Wanda pulls back in all the chaos magic and transforms and gives herself her new costume, which was very cool. And it was just like the vision that the Mind Stone showed her, right? When it gave her first, upgraded her powers. So I thought that was beautiful. And it's a stunning outfit, which we'll go over in a separate video. But she just looks incredible. And she has also crazy unkempt hair like Agatha. And me today. So today I'm wearing I'm a witch as well. I just thought that was great. And I like that she has more of an Eastern European look as well. It's very cool. It's a darker look too. Well, we'll talk about it. So she brings Agatha down, and she gives her a punishment worse than death. And that's to trap her in Westview forever. And she says, I'm going to leave you in the role that you cast yourself in, the nosy neighbor. And she says, I'm sorry. And Agatha says, no, you're not. You're cruel. And I thought that was great because I think it's a hint at Wanda's Wanda's villainous tendencies. So yeah, she turns her in, and and one last ditch effort, Agatha's like, you have no idea what you've unleashed, what you've become. You're going to need me. And Wanda says, well, then I'll know where to find you. I love it. And I like when they leave as a family. They look really kind of crazy as a family now. It's a great outfit for Wanda. It's really, I think, fantastic. So then she starts to shrink the hex, and Westview turns back to the way it was, and they go home. And it's, the sun sets on them. It's just like, oh, it's so sad. This is like the whole raison d'etre for this episode. So the sun is setting on their family, and, Wanda can hardly look at Vision. And they go back, and they turn back into their regular selves, and they go into the house, and they close the door, and they took their children in to die. Oh, that's crazy. But, they have that great callback where Wanda says family is forever, like she said earlier in the season. And then at the door, she says, thank you, boys, for letting me be your mother. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They didn't have a choice. You created them. So I thought that was an interesting line. And then we have this great picture. I hope she got to keep that since she just made it out of thin air, since they never posed for that. And they see the hex coming for them, and they have this beautiful goodbye, really gorgeous, with some more great lines. And he's like, Wanda, can you at least tell me what I am? And she says, you're the piece of the Mind Stone that lives inside of me. And she says stuff like, you're my sadness, you're my hope, but most of all, you're my love. And that's a callback, I think, to love persevering. She made him come back. And then also, right before they go, he's trying to act brave, but he's so sad and scared. It's very touching. And he says, we've said goodbye before, so it stands to reason. And then she finishes the thought that we'll say hello again. And I think they will too, those crazy kids. I love it. And he says, so long, darling, as the house and he disappears before her. I thought that was really stunning. And this is very Disney princess-like. It was like the reverse of when Beast transforms into human. And it was very cool. So she's left much more at peace because she's, as one of you said in the live stream, I think it was Anthony, that was the most crazy grief counseling we've ever seen. But she feels much better now. Who hasn't been there? Who hasn't thrown a huge temper tantrum and made everyone's life around you a mess and then been like, oh, I feel much better now. And everyone's like, thanks for putting me through that. But anyway, she's back in the Foundation. And she leaves, and she has a hoodie on now because now she's an anti-hero. And she says, and everyone in town still hates her. And Monica's like, they don't know what you gave up. And Wanda's like, it wouldn't change how they saw me. And she knows that the world now sees her as a villain. And Monica's like, hey, I'd have done the same thing if I could have seen my mom again. And I'm like, oh, tears. It's more about the grief comparison. I think that's really strong. And then she turns back into her costume, adding now a hood to the ensemble, a hood and cape, and flies off. And I love this shot of her from above with the cape above her. I mean, she looks so cool. And then she flies away from Westview and takes one look back, doesn't turn to salt, takes one look back, and then that's the end. And then we have our 2 end credit sequences, which we'll go over very quickly here. But we'll go over them a little bit more in a separate video. But we see a movie theater, which I just couldn't believe how much it made me realize how much I miss movie theaters when I saw them in there. I was like, I would love to be in there. And it's revealed that there are Skrulls operating, and this Skrull says, a friend of your mother's would like to talk to you up there, and I believe it's Nick Fury in his space station that we saw at the end of Far From Home. And Monica's like, all right, upgrade. Although S.W.O.R.D. doesn't have a director now, so you'd think she'd want to stick with that. And then we have this end credit sequence, which I'm believing takes place in the mountains of Sokovia. So Wanda went home. You can go home again, and you can see cool like Eastern European architecture on the cabin. And so you see her go in there, and she's making tea. But in the other room, and some of you said this was like an astral projection that Doctor Strange does. So I mean, fine, I'll go with it. But she's studying the Darkhold, and she just starts to read it. And so because you just see it open in this sequence. And she's like, I'm gonna better understand my powers of the Scarlet Witch. But as she starts to read it, she hears her boys call out to her, and they say, Mom, help! And you see her get a look on her face like, here we go again. And then that's the end. So I think that, that is a strong setup. But, again, it's not as aggressive as we had thought it would be. And it's much more like the Marvel, the MCU has been in the past. So that's the breakdown. Share your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching this season with me. And we're going to do the same thing all over again for Falcon and Winter Soldier when it starts on March 19th. The viewing parties when they air and the breakdowns right after. But I have 2 more videos coming for you about what's next after WandaVision that will go up later today.